Our core job, in addition to the diligence that you've heard, is finding sponsor opportunities and sponsors to partner with. And Jesse is a very good example of the type of operator and farmer on the permanent crop side that we want to partner with and bring opportunities to the platform. Jesse's done 2 deals with us, and if you want to kind of just give a little overview of, your current operations and where you are today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and it's great to be here. And so my name's Jesse Bentley from South Georgia. I own and operate Georgia Pecan Nursery, and then we started business about 10 years ago. And from there, we started investing into long-term nut production orchards, continued to grow, and capital was a big challenge for us. Got in touch with AcreTrader guys 2 years ago, and we did our first deal at the end of last year, and then just did another deal together.
So you've planted over 1 million trees to date, and we talked earlier. The panel kind of teed it up nicely a little bit about your process. Georgia's the largest pecan producing state in the country. When you're based in Valdosta, when you kind of look at the landscape across Georgia, and you obviously have great insight from the nursery that you guys have, when you pick out and identify a property that you want to bring onto the platform and co-invest in yourself, walk us through some of the characteristics that you want to see and the boxes that you want to check on those opportunities.
Yeah, so I look at a lot of land just as like you guys do, and run through the due diligence, and I would say 9 out of 10 do not check out. I came across Burke County. The reason I like Burke County, where the first deal is, Keysville Pecan Orchard, and also contiguous to that, Briar Creek development that we're about to put in place. We're at an elevation of 300 foot and above, so that helps with, we have high humidity in Georgia that helps to reduce the scab pressure on the pecans, reduce our inputs. But just like all of the deals that y'all are sourcing, we're looking at the soil content, a sandy loam, medium, density, and has a restrictive clay layer, 24 inches down or so is what we're looking for. In Georgia, obviously, we've got the Gulf to the southwest, and we've got the Atlantic to the east, so you have the hurricane risk. In Burke County, we're over 130 miles from the ocean, so that reduces that risk. And I believe y'all even helped run a graph. We haven't had a hurricane force winds enter Burke County, I want to say it was like 75 years. Also, the aquifer, we're sit on great aquifers in Georgia. We're blessed with, the rain is a blessing. We get about 65 inches of rain a year, even though, at times we're cussing it, or if it's, it's not coming, then, we're praying for it, at least some are. But we can pump a lot of water, and we drill down. We don't have to drill deep. We've got good quality water. We've got quality soils, sunshine, and it makes for quality fruit.
And you're doing something a little different in Georgia that has not been done. I think the industry I would characterize as somewhat sleepy, and you're bringing kind of a new approach to the industry, and maybe walk us through that.
Yeah, so the industry is fairly sleepy. If you look at production of pecans over the last, probably 30 years, it's 250, 400 million pounds. It's just like that, and everybody, as I was entering in the industry, and I was like that kid when I was younger that used to always get in trouble because I was asking why, tell me not to do something or you can't do something, why? And so as I came into the industry, I was asking a lot of questions. Why are we doing it like this? And I wasn't getting answers, and so I continue to ask those questions, push the envelope, look out to California and the way that they're doing things in pistachios, almonds, walnuts, etc., and taking what I can from those industries and bringing it back, and at least what is applicable to pecans. And some of those things are increasing the densities. Some of the varieties that we're planting, they're coming into production at year 4, year 5, and you look at the space in between the standard density farms in Georgia, 40, 50 foot space in between the trees, and they already have fruit on them. It's like, man, there's we could put 4 more trees in between those 2 trees, and increase our yields. And so that's really what I've been focused on, is increasing yields per acre, reducing inputs per acre, and the things that I can control. I can't control the inflation. I can't control the cost of the inputs. I can control the amount of the inputs. I can control the varieties that I'm planting. I can control the spacing of my planting, the heading of my planting, looking at north-south and what is, the maximum sunlight to my leaves for photosynthesis and nut production, and, just being as progressive as I can. And that's we're excited about that.
Yeah. The biggest risk is probably scab to high-density planting, would you say?
Yeah,
How do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, that is, I'd say, the biggest risk. We're planting varieties that are medium to low input, so they have resistance to scab. But as you increase the density, then scab, with the airflow, you're reducing your airflow, so we're having to get into hedging. And east of the Mississippi, we haven't been hedging more than 5 years, so we just don't have a whole lot of data on, the best practices for hedging like you do in Arizona and New Mexico. But they've got 2 varieties that they plant out there, Wichita, Western Sly. East of the Mississippi, we have a ton of varieties that we're planting, and the reason that we have all those different varieties is as the fungus figures out the DNA of that tree, it starts to really attack it. And we're having to increase, fungicide sprays. It used to be desirable, for example, you could get away with spraying maybe 5 to 6 fungicide sprays a year. They're spraying 14 to 16 fungicide sprays a year. And so, with the high density, it's really also the sunlight and the shading. So eventually the density has to be reduced, so we're going to have to cut out trees. But we're going to maximize the most return in the younger years, and as the trees get bigger, we'll cut them out.
And it was mentioned in an earlier panel about the value add component. I think you really exemplify that well. Talk about the opportunity set in Georgia today, kind of the entry price for bare land, and, with improvements, kind of where you think you can take it.
Yeah, so the price of land in the report that was showed earlier, around $3,200 average price per acre, I would say that's fairly, accurate. We can find now, with commodities being where they are, everybody, if it's, irrigated, row crop, they're wanting, if you can find anything for sale. There's one the other day went at $8,000 per acre, which is crazy. I think that is an example of too much to pay, even though it is a good farm. But it's pressuring me as well as others to have to go to ag conversions. And so, but we can find land historically, at least pre-COVID, $2,000 to $3,000 an acre. Then we've got about $3,000 an acre of development cost, and that's fairly reasonable and cheap, and especially when you're looking at the high density planting and the returns that we're getting on that in the early years. It really makes for a good investment. It's still that large barrier to entry is the non-productive years. And, for guys getting into the industry, it's just a large capital outlay, and especially the ones that are wanting to plant pecans, just like Matt was saying, there aren't guys that are finance majors, a lot of them that haven't gone to college, and they just don't have this whole network available to them out there, and they're going to traditional banks and trying to figure out how to finance these deals, and it just can't get done in pecans. And so that really is a restriction, a restrictor on the industry. And so,
yeah, and you've got a pretty unique perspective with your nursery. What are you seeing in terms, and that's kind of just not only in Georgia, but really across the country. What are you seeing in terms of new plantings? Any kind of trends you'd call out from that visibility you have there?
Yeah, so the nursery did bring, and I'll kind of give y'all a step back here a little bit. So my dad he had pecan orchards and nurseries in the 60s and 70s. He sold out, then he went to custom managing pecan orchards, got out of that, went into construction, continued to dabble in pecans a little bit here or there, and he was retiring, and he needed something to do, and that's when 10 years ago, I was like, hey, let's do something. And he's like, what do you want to do? I was like, farm something, because it's always interested me. And he's like, what do you want to farm? And I was like, I don't know, row crops. And he's like, well, I need $1 million of equipment and a couple thousand acres. And I was like, I got $50,000, right, so we ain't doing that. And so, anyways, I'd always kept up with pecans and grew up going to a family friend's pecan orchard. I said, well, what about a pecan tree nursery? The price is $3 at the farm gate for in-shell. China's buying like crazy, et cetera. There's a shortage of trees, and he just lit up. And so we took that $50,000 and we started leasing a little bit of land, it's like 5 acres. We thought we were, high cotton. And so anyways, we started growing nursery trees, and as we grew the nursery, and the reason that we didn't jump right into long-term nut production is because we didn't have the money to buy the land, or nobody wanted to lease you the land for 40 years, at least at that time, but I convinced about 500 acres, the family with about 500 acres, several families to lease me their land for 40 years with the first right of refusal. And so we did develop that, but we needed that cash flow, and the nursery provided us that cash flow within 24 months. We took that, those proceeds, put it back into the nursery, continued to grow, got to a point where we were producing more trees than we were selling. So that started to subsidize the long-term nut production. So that's when we made the decision, let's take these trees and look for some land to set them out for long-term nut production. That's where I went in and started with some 40-year leases and kind of maxed that out. Then we started buying farms and continuing to invest in long-term nut production. Then, hooked up with you guys, and we've kind of really taken off from there.
Yeah,
so
that's probably a good point to ask. You've done Keysville, you've done Briar Creek. That's going to be 1,150 planted acres when it's all said and done. If you didn't have AcreTrader, what would that look like? And tell me what your experience has been in working with us.
So the experience working together, it's been tremendous. I believe I was searching, because myself and Bill Bowers, who's in the room, we work together, and Bill helps with, kind of putting together the models and the acquisitions, and he's a good, soundboard for me to bounce things off of. And we were working on the performer, because folks kept coming to us and saying, hey, how do we invest in pecans? How do we invest in pecans? And so we started putting together, PPM and the Performa, but we didn't have all of the ingredients. And so we were sourcing land, and we were trying to put the land under contract and in due diligence, put together the PPM, all of the investment docs, find investors, figure out the debt side, and put it all together. And we struck out, a couple of times, and we finally were like, screw it, we're not doing this anymore, it's not going to work. So we just went back to continuing to invest our own money and grow as we could. But I believe I was Googling, how to timber REITs and other large investment groups on the ag side, how do their investments work? And I believe that's where the SEO of AcreTrader, pinged in, and they were up in the corner of my computer or my phone. And so I logged in and signed in, subscribed, and I saw an almond deal, which if the almond guys from California, I would like to say thank you, because I looked at y'all's deals and I was like, okay, they've proven the concept. It works for a permanent crop. And I looked at some of the documents, and that gave me some guidance. It gave me some inspiration. So I'm very thankful for that if y'all are in the audience. So from there, that's when I reached out to Ben and said, hey, would you be interested in a pecan deal? And he was like, hold on. Threw me on speakerphone, went in Carter's office. He's like, hey, got a pecan guy from Georgia on the phone. And Carter's like, hold on. He's talking to some investor, puts him on mute. He's like, hey, you got something in an opportunity zone? And I was like, damn, what's the opportunity zone? But I was like, yeah, I think so. Let me check into it. I'll get back with you. And, So anyhow, so I start diving into that. I'm laying in bed looking at land until 1, 2 a.m. every night, and sure enough, there's an opportunity that pops up in Burke County, and I was like, this son of a gun ain't gonna last long. It was open land, 650 acres. They had it listed for like $2,200 an acre, and I was like, I've got to get this ASAP. Called the guy the next morning, broker next morning. I said, let's lock it up, full price, and called the AcreTrader guys and said, listen, you got a track, and I got on the census map, and it's an opportunity zone. Y'all want to do some business? And so we started. That's how we started the relationship, and it really kicked off well. And I tell you, I was at first, and it was no fault of Carter or Ben or Elise. The whole group, said and did exactly what they said they were going to do, but there was kind of, I'd never stepped in. This is going to be a big deal. I've never met AcreTrader guys there in Arkansas. I'm in Georgia. I had other investors that wanted to move forward on this deal. And, I was a little hesitant. And I was stepping out there on a limb, and just like they were stepping out there on a limb with putting me in front of their investors. But we both worked through the process and took that step, and I'm very thankful that I did. It's been a great experience.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the reasons we're so bullish at AcreTrader on pecans, and you kind of mentioned following other tree nuts before, if you look globally, you've got 1 million pounds of almonds that are consumed annually. You've only got 152,000 pounds of pecans consumed annually. And a part of the reason for that is that you just haven't really had the marketing push behind pecans. And a little bit of that is because of the West Coast growers and the East Coast growers haven't really gotten along historically and pushed together. You've got the USDA marketing order in 2016. Do you feel like, there's now actually a budget for marketing, and it sounds like the American Pecan Council is really starting to work together to make that push. Have you noticed a difference, and do you feel like you can start to follow the path that was laid out by almonds?
Yeah, so Mike Adams out of Texas, really he put together that grassroots effort. So a lot of thanks goes out to him. And the industry hasn't changed a lot in the last 50 years, and they don't like change, and and there was a tax associated with that. Nobody likes the word tax, but really a lot of hard work went into that, and that referendum was voted in place, and in my opinion, and also in the opinion of a majority, as the referendum just came up for revote and it was approved, it is a good thing for our industry. Prior to the federal marketing order and the American Pecan Council, which is the body of growers and shellers who get together and make those decisions for the industry, it was Georgia was representing Georgia, Texas was representing Texas, and we were divided to some extent, and so now having everybody aligned as American pecans. I believe economically it makes more sense. They're doing a good job of collaborating and coming up with standards. A lot of crop was going to China, and the expectation of I'm just going to say like a Class A nut here in the United States is one thing. Well, in China, there's a different expectation, and there's a lot of distance, and that was causing a lot of volatility and a lot of turmoil. So they're setting a lot of good standards. They're opening up a lot of markets. They're also the Pecan Federation is lobbying for pecans up in Washington and being a voice for pecans, and so. All in all, yes, I believe it is a good thing. And then there's a lot of data that's being collected about, on pecans, a number of producing acres, a number of acres that are here in the U.S. that are not yet in production, and there's still a lot, to be had there. But it's raising awareness into pecans. I believe increasing demand tremendously in pecans, and thus there's a lot of investment starting to come into pecans, but we still have a long ways to go on the breeding side of things, with rootstock, and almonds, walnuts, pistachios, et cetera. They're tissue culturing a lot of their trees, similar DNA. You look at pecans right now, and we've got every tree in every orchard has, a varying DNA in some manner, at least at the rootstock. And so we've got a long ways to go, but it is exciting of where we're heading, and it's exciting to be in Georgia and be on the forefront of this change that's happening in the industry, and being able to, really blaze a path and do it the right way, or at least what I believe is the right way, and what I believe is the future of the industry.
Yeah, it really seems like, awareness even domestically is not where it needs to be, and let alone you start looking at opportunities like China and India and start opening up some of these new markets. It is a really good outlook for the industry.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We got to work on the tariff right now. That's a real kicker with all the tariff wars. The tariff went from 7% to roughly 50% going into China. That with COVID and some other things, Hurricane Michael that came through, blew down about 700,000 trees in Georgia, et cetera. So there's definitely been some bumps in the roads, but everything would trend back up.
So I know you got Keysville planted. You're probably starting to work on the first clearing of Briar Creek, and I think we're supposed to be talking about the business of farming. Tell me about anything that's kind of changed over the last year or so. Any trends that you're seeing you like to call out? Labor seems to be a pressure point. The export market seems to be an issue. Fertilizer prices, just anything that you're seeing on the ground.
Well, on the ground, the things that are changing. Labor is a challenge for us right now. On the long-term nut production side, it's not labor intensive as the nursery side. The nursery side, we might have 75 bodies working, 3 to 4 days a week. On long-term nut production side, we might have 3 guys operating tractors, fixing irrigation, spraying or whatnot on 1,000 acres. But we were ordering tractors 3 and 4 weeks before we need them. The tractors for Briar Creek I just ordered last week, and I won't need them for another 10 months. But I knew that there was going to be that lead time. I'm pre-buying chemicals right now. I'm holding off on building some barns, hopefully the steel and some of the construction will slow down to a point that it gets a little bit more feasible. But really just, the inflation in the global supply chain, that's the biggest changes right now. But the ag conversions, like I was saying, we used to be able to buy open crop land, but nobody wants to sell right now. So we're going to these timber REITs, and we're looking where the good soils are, and we're trying to buy up timberland, for next year, the following year, and put it in the pipeline, do conversions. And then also we're looking for large contiguous tracts. It's really what we're excited about is in Burke County, there is large tracts, and seems to be a lot of tracts in Burke County that are owned by timber REITs, and there's just really not that emotional attachment to that parcel, and we can usually convince those guys to trade. Might take a little extra money, but at least when they're getting ready to clear cut. So that's another thing that we're doing is we're going to the loggers and the timber brokers, and also kind of to the courthouse, et cetera. We're looking at tax documents, and we're seeing where timber liens, where places are going to be clear cut, and then we're sending letters to those owners and soliciting, hey, so you're about to clear cut your farm. What are you thinking you're going to do with it thereafter? And is there opportunity for us to purchase it? So.
That's interesting. You mentioned one of the headwinds is the multiple unproductive years before you actually see a return on that. That seems like something the VC world would be used to handling, and food production seems like it'd be more important than the next app or social media platform. Are you seeing them starting to look at this because their model kind of lines up with that?
That might be a question for you.
That doesn't fit the VC model. Venture capitalists are looking for kind of a moonshot opportunity. This is more equity in nature in terms of doing a development project, but it doesn't quite fit the VC model in my opinion. So because you really don't get that first commercial leaf in pecans until year 7 or 8, it does create a difficulty in funding. We feel like our platform, one thing we try to do is educate investors that look, if you look at either pistachios or pecans, the hold period needs to be longer on a development project because a lot of the return profile is going to come in the later years, and a lot of it's going to be contingent on that exit price. So if you're buying land at $3,000 an acre and you're doing all the development work, putting in the planning for it, your exit, if you put a mid-teens cap rate on it, you're looking at a $20,000 to $25,000 an acre exit rate. And that's where a lot of the IRR and a lot of the return profile of a development project comes from. And so the impetus is on us at AcreTrader and our IR team to educate investors on, the difference in, what might be more of a yield product versus a development product where a lot of the opportunities on the back end. And what we try to do to kind of create a margin of safety is that $20,000 to $25,000 in exit price that we underwrite these projects at. That's, I believe, to be a very conservative assumption, and I think you could easily argue for that exit price to be much higher. So,
Yeah, and we were talking about exit valuation, and that's been a hot topic between me and Bill and speaking with the AcreTrader guys. And, looking at other permanent crops, it was the high single digits, was the exit valuation. But when we dropped that in the model, it sent the number through the roof, and I couldn't leave that in the model and then go sell that to the investors. Somebody said earlier, under promise and over perform, and we believe that we have everything within our model is conservative, and that's what we're shooting to do. And so, but it's going to be awesome if we go to exit and we can get high single digit on the exit cap. It'd be great.
Yeah.
And especially given the opportunities and the step up basis, because we'll have depreciated everything out except the land, and so it's going to be very nice.
As almonds are very popular right now, and same with pistachios, but the environment in California is at best iffy with water and labor costs and all those inputs rising. Do you see pecans as stepping into that role as almonds and pistachios rise where consumers go to that other nut categorization? What's good for almonds good for y'all, or are y'all competitors in that way? Is there a negative correlation?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure that I have the answer from the consumer standpoint on how they correlate almonds and pecans. I know that the demand outweighs or the consumption outweighs the production of the pecans at this point. We believe that to be the case in the foreseeable future. Drew was asking me what excites me about pecans in Georgia. And one thing that I fall back on and one thing that I rely on as people ask me the question of, hey, do you think that pecans are going to be overplanted because they're planting them now in South Africa, they're planting them here, there, and everywhere? What I fall back on is in Georgia, the abundance of quality natural resources, from the quality of the water, the soils that we have, sunlight, et cetera. We produce exceptionally high quality fruit. And at the end of the day, even if there was an overproduction of pecans, I feel very certain that in Georgia, that the top producers that pay attention to all their best management practices and produce quality fruit, there will always be a home for that fruit. Now, I know that that's not the answer to your question, but I do get asked that often, and so I'm excited about what we're producing in Georgia.
Yeah, I'd maybe add that the pecan industry hasn't had a marketing push behind it, and that's really important. If you look at almonds, the California Almond Board, they have done a fantastic job. Their marketing budget annually is about $95 million. There was not a federal marketing order for pecans until 2016, and just now the American Pecan Council has finally come together to create a real marketing effort to really push the industry and create that awareness that we were talking about. And their budget's only $9 million this year. So, they still vastly trail the almond industry. You look at pistachios, you've got Wonderful, who is really driving the ship there in marketing, and they're kind of a marketing powerhouse and do a fantastic job. So there is a path that has been laid by the almond industry and the pistachio industry for the pecan industry to follow. I would look at them very much as substitute products, and but there's still, I think, the plant-based protein trend should likely continue. So that's why we think the outlook for pecans is pretty good internally.
Yeah, and I think there's everything points that the pecan federal marketing order and its results are going to follow what took place in almonds. But we've got to, with the price going down, and everybody talks about the price going down as if it's a bad thing. I don't see the price going down as a bad thing. It's just really pushing the envelope back to the farmers who, for so long, have been comfortable in the way things have been done. It's really forcing them to change the way things are done now. It's forcing us to really look at breeding programs and come up with varieties, root stocks, where we can have a dwarf tree so we can increase the density and leave the density increase long term. But I believe with the with the price, if we can reduce the volatility, get the price down, produce more weight, have some consistency at the farm gate or pricing of the meat, then you're going to see a higher demand because food companies are going to start putting pecan ingredients, into their recipes, but they need a consistent price. Right now, they can't. I mean, you buy a pack of crackers in the Jiffy store for the last 20 years, it's been 50 cents, and pecan pricing has been up and down. So I think with the reduction in volatility through efforts of the federal marketing order as well as other factors, increased production, you're going to see consumption naturally increase as well. Thank you all.